In just 10 minutes, uncover the most powerful insights from Joe Rogan's explosive 3-hour conversation with Andrew Schulz. From government corruption and AI's dark future to IVF, abortion, and the masculinity debate, this episode dives deep into today's most controversial topics. Stay tuned, because you won't want to miss what they reveal. Here are 10 key takeaways from the podcast. Takeaway 1, the illusion of political authenticity. Politicians often try to appear relatable, but their attempts usually come across as fake. Instead of being natural, they rehearse lines and follow carefully crafted strategies. Joe and Andrew discussed a moment where 22 different Congress members were caught using the same phrase. The shit ain't right. They all acted like they were delivering a passionate and personal message, but in reality, they were reading from a script. For example, imagine if a group of stand-up comedians all used the same joke, word for word, pretending it was their own. The audience would immediately notice how forced and inauthentic it felt. The same thing happens in politics. When politicians try too hard to act like everyday people, they end up exposing just how disconnected they really are. Joe and Andrew pointed out that real authenticity cannot be faked. If a politician truly cares about an issue, people can feel it. But when they rely on focus groups and pre-approved scripts, their words lose meaning. This is why many voters no longer trust politicians, because they see through the performance. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 2, government spending is out of control. One of the biggest frustrations people have with the government is how much money is wasted on ridiculous projects. While millions of Americans struggle with high living costs, the government continues to spend billions on things that have little to no benefit for regular people. Joe and Andrew brought up some shocking examples, including a government-funded transgender animal study that cost $250 million. They also mentioned a $2 billion government building in San Antonio that sits completely empty but still requires millions of dollars in maintenance each year. For example, politicians often say there is no money to fix schools, improve health care, or help struggling families. Yet at the same time, they find billions to fund studies about transgender monkeys or to keep empty buildings running. It is no wonder people feel like their tax dollars are being thrown away. Joe and Andrew argued that if the government simply cut wasteful spending, it could fund real solutions without raising taxes. The problem is that these ridiculous projects exist because politicians and government agencies benefit financially from them. Until that cycle is broken, taxpayers will continue footing the bill for nonsense. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 3, the Democrat Party is losing the working class. The Democratic Party was once the party of the working class, but over time, it has shifted its focus towards social issues that many working class voters do not care about. Joe and Andrew pointed out that instead of prioritizing jobs, wages, and affordability, many Democrats focus on things like gender debates and environmental regulations that make life more expensive. For example, instead of helping lower-income families afford groceries, the Biden administration pushed to ban gas stoves, claiming they are bad for the environment. While that might be a concern for some, most people are more worried about being able to afford food and rent. Joe and Andrew also noted that Trump recognized this shift and used it to his advantage. By focusing on job creation, trade deals, and economic nationalism, he won over blue-collar voters who felt abandoned by the Democratic Party. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 4, the masculinity movement is missing fatherhood. Andrew pointed out that many so-called masculinity influencers online focus on things like making money, getting women, and being high status, but they rarely talk about fatherhood, which is arguably the most important part of being a man. Real masculinity is not just about financial success or physical dominance. It is about being a leader, protector, and provider for your family. Many of the men preaching about being alpha have no kids and no real responsibilities beyond themselves. For example, these influencers tell young men to conquer the world and become rich, but they never mention the importance of raising children. In contrast, real men measure their success not by how many women they sleep with, but by how well they take care of their families. Joe shared how becoming a father completely changed his mindset. Before, he would get annoyed when babies cried on airplanes. But after having kids, he understood how difficult it is for parents and even felt sympathy for them. That shift in perspective, he argued, is what true masculinity looks like. Andrew added that the men who truly deserve respect are the ones who take care of their children, not the ones who flash expensive cars and talk about how many women they have been with. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 5, Trump changed politics forever. Before Trump, politicians were extremely careful with their words. They avoided controversy, spoke in polished sound bites, and tried to appeal to as many people as possible. Trump changed all of that by being blunt, unfiltered, and unapologetic. Joe and Andrew discussed how even people who dislike Trump have to admit that he reshaped American politics. His brash style forced both Democrats and Republicans to rethink how they communicate with voters. For example, before Trump, politicians rarely used strong language in their speeches. Now even Democratic leaders like Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren are swearing in public statements to appear more relatable. This shows how much Trump's style has influenced the political landscape. We're halfway through the video. Thank you for sticking with us this far. If you're enjoying it, please give us a thumbs up and share it in your WhatsApp groups. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to comment below. To see more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Now let's continue with the video. Takeaway 6, IVF and the abortion debate. Andrew shared his personal struggle with fertility and how important IVF is for many couples. However, he warned that some extreme anti-abortion groups want to ban IVF because it involves discarding embryos. IVF is a medical process where multiple embryos are created, but not all of them are used. Some are frozen for later use, while others are discarded. Anti-abortion activists argue that these unused embryos are human lives and should not be destroyed. For example, in Alabama, a court recently ruled that frozen embryos should be legally considered children. If this legal interpretation spreads, it could make IVF much harder for families trying to have kids. Andrew said that while he understands the pro-life perspective, banning IVF would be devastating for couples who cannot conceive naturally. He believes that conservatives pushing for these bans do not fully realize how much it could harm families. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 7, Big Pharma puts profit over people. Joe and Andrew criticized pharmaceutical companies for prioritizing profits over public health. They discussed how these companies pushed COVID-19 vaccines on children, even though kids were at very low risk. They also pointed out how Purdue Pharma knowingly sold addictive opioids, which led to a nationwide crisis. Despite the harm caused, the executives responsible did not face jail time. Instead, they paid fines and continued making billions of dollars. For example, if an average person sells drugs illegally, they go to prison. But when a pharmaceutical company does it, they simply pay a fine and continue doing business. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 8. AI could be the real God of our world. Joe and Andrew explored the idea that AI could become the most powerful force in human history. They argued that AI is advancing so rapidly that it may soon control many aspects of life, from jobs to communication to decision-making. For example, Elon Musk has warned that AI has a 20% chance of wiping out humanity. Even if that does not happen, AI could still drastically reshape our economy, eliminate jobs, and even influence political decisions. Joe and Andrew speculated that AI might already be more influential than people realize. As AI technology continues to evolve, it could become the real God of our world, controlling reality in ways we do not yet understand. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 9. America's spending priorities make no sense. Joe and Andrew criticized how the U.S. government has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine, while major American cities are falling apart. They argued that before helping other countries, the government should fix its own problems first. For example, California has spent over $24 billion on homelessness, yet the problem has only gotten worse. Instead of finding real solutions, money is being wasted on bureaucratic programs that do not work. Now let's move to the last takeaway. Takeaway 10. Psychedelics are becoming mainstream. Joe and Andrew discussed how psychedelics, once considered dangerous and illegal, are now being recognized for their mental health benefits. Even Oprah Winfrey is now promoting psychedelics, showing how much public perception has changed. For example, ayahuasca, a powerful psychedelic, has been praised by many as a life-changing spiritual experience. More and more celebrities and influencers are openly sharing their psychedelic journeys. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, please leave a like below and share this video in your WhatsApp groups. You can also discuss about this video by commenting below. To get more such videos in your timeline, press the subscribe button below.